Have you ever looked at someone you loved deeply, someone you thought was your safe place, and felt a strange, gnawing fear that maybe you can't trust your own mind anymore? That's the silent cruelty of gaslighting in love. It's not the loud fights that stick with you. It's the slow erosion of your confidence, the way your memory becomes negotiable, and how even your most natural feelings, hurt, joy, disappointment, get turned against you. Let me take you into the everyday moments where this happens, because it never starts with something obvious. Picture this. You're in the kitchen cooking dinner. You've had a long day, you're chopping vegetables, and you mention casually, "Hey, I felt hurt yesterday when you ignored me at the party." You're not yelling, you're just opening up. They stop what they're doing, roll their eyes, and say, "I never ignored you." You're imagining things. You pause, your chest tightens. You replay the night in your mind, standing next to them, watching them laugh with someone else while you were invisible. You know it happened, but now you're being told it didn't. 10 minutes later, you're apologizing for making a scene. Or this one, you're waiting at a cafe. They arrive 20 minutes late. No text, no sorry. You say, "I was worried." They sigh, shake their head, and say, "You always overreact." It's exhausting. Suddenly, you're defending yourself, explaining you didn't mean to overreact. You just cared. By the end, you're swallowing your frustration and ordering them a coffee to smooth things over. And here's a quieter version. You're curled up on the couch together. They laugh and make a cutting joke about your body or your family or the way you talk. It stings, so you say softly, "That hurt my feelings." They frown and snap back. "God, you can't take a joke, can you?" You feel childish, heavy, embarrassed. The laughter is gone. You end up feeling like you ruined the moment. Gaslighting in love doesn't just distort facts. It makes you doubt your right to feel. That's what makes it so corrosive. And here's the hardest part. You might not even see it as abuse, because it's wrapped inside intimacy. They hold your hand afterward. They say they love you. They kiss your forehead when you're quiet. They give you just enough warmth that you second-guess whether the coldness you felt was even real. This is what psychologists call the cycle of idealization and devaluation. Gábor Maté often reminds us that when we've grown up with attachment wounds, we don't just crave love. We crave the feeling of being chosen, even if the cost is losing ourselves. That's why gaslighting in love can feel so addictive. The very person who tears your reality apart is also the one who soothed the wound they created. Carl Jung wrote about the shadow, the parts of ourselves we can't face. Gaslighters often project their own shadow onto their partner. So when they accuse you of being too dramatic or dishonest, often they're talking about something they can't admit in themselves. But because you love them, because you're bonded, you absorb it. You let their projection reshape who you think you are. And over time, this pattern leaves you with subtle but devastating questions. Am I remembering wrong? Am I really too sensitive? Maybe I am the problem? These aren't small questions. They eat into your identity. You start editing yourself, walking on eggshells, avoiding certain words, changing how you dress, watching their reactions like a hawk. You live not in love, but in a constant state of nervous surveillance. Let me show you how it plays out in everyday life. At work, you hesitate before speaking up in meetings because you're so used to being told you misunderstood things at home. With friends, you cover for your partner's sharp comments, laughing them off because you're trained to minimize. With money, you stop questioning their decisions, even if they drain the account. Because last time you did, you were accused of being controlling. Even in your own body, you feel anxious and tense, but then tell yourself, "It must be me. I need to calm down." That's how gaslighting steals more than just the truth of a single moment. It colonizes your whole sense of reality. And here's what makes it even trickier. love bombing. In the early stages, maybe they showered you with affection, late-night calls, flowers, texts that made you feel like the center of their world. You felt chosen, special, finally safe. That intensity wasn't random, it was the hook, and it sets the stage for confusion later. Because when they deny, dismiss, or shift blame, part of you clings to the memory of who they were at the beginning. You tell yourself, maybe I'm overthinking. Maybe if I can just be easier to love, that person will come back. Verena Kast, who studied emotional cycles, explains how longing itself becomes addictive. We chase the return of the ideal phase and ignore the painful reality of the present. So here's the stark truth. If you found yourself apologizing when you did nothing wrong, doubting your memory when it's clear, or feeling like you're too much just for having needs, this isn't love. It's control dressed as closeness. And yet, I know it's not that easy to leave or even to see clearly. Because gaslighting isn't just psychological, it's emotional, bodily. The nervous system becomes wired to seek their approval and avoid their punishment. It becomes your rhythm, your normal. That's why so many of my clients sit across from me and say, I don't know if it's me or them. I just feel so confused, and confusion is the point. When you're confused, you're easier to control. Erich Fromm put it this way: the task we must set for ourselves is not to feel secure, but to be able to tolerate insecurity. In love, gaslighting flips that upside down. You tolerate endless insecurity just to feel the illusion of security in their arms. So let's name it clearly. Gaslighting in love is not a mistake in communication. It's not two people simply misunderstanding each other. It's a pattern of denying, distorting, and blaming that keeps you doubting yourself so the other person doesn't have to take responsibility. And if any of these scenes sound familiar, if you found yourself saying sorry with a lump in your throat when all you wanted was kindness, then this episode is for you. Because here's the good news. Once you can name it, once you can see the cycle, you're no longer fully inside of it. That's where we'll go next, into the origins of why this happens and why some of us are especially vulnerable to it. But first, just pause with this one question. If love makes you lose yourself, is it really love? If gaslighting in love leaves you questioning yourself, the obvious question is, why do we stay? Why do we let it happen, sometimes for years? The answer is rarely that we're weak or foolish or don't know better. The answer is that long before your partner's words twisted your reality, someone else taught you to doubt your own truth. Let's go back. Maybe you grew up in a house where your feelings didn't count for much. You cried, and someone told you, stop being dramatic. You got angry, and they called you disrespectful. You were excited, and they said, calm down, don't make a scene. Over time, you learned a quiet lesson. My inner world is inconvenient. My feelings only bring trouble. Gábor Maté explains this with piercing clarity. As children, we have two basic needs: attachment and authenticity. We need closeness with caregivers, but we also need to live in alignment with what we feel. When those two needs collide, a child will always sacrifice authenticity for attachment, because survival depends on keeping connection, not on self-expression. Think about that for a second. You didn't choose to silence yourself. You adapted. You survived by pushing down what was real. So fast forward into adulthood. You meet someone. They're charming, attentive, maybe even intoxicating at first. They say they adore you. They can't stop thinking about you. It feels like you've finally been chosen without having to earn it. But soon, the cycle begins. They dismiss your memory. They call you too sensitive. They twist your words, and instead of walking away, something in you flares with recognition. It's familiar. Not safe, but familiar. Jung once noted that we are compelled to repeat what is unresolved. We find ourselves circling the same dynamics, not because we want the pain, but because some unconscious part of us is trying to master it. So you stay, not because you enjoy it, not because you don't know what's happening. You stay because on some level, this is the script your nervous system already knows. Let me ground this in a few everyday scenarios. Take Sarah. She grew up with a father who dismissed her feelings constantly. "Don't be silly," he'd say if she cried. "You're exaggerating." As an adult, Sarah finds herself with a partner who regularly says, "That never happened," when she recalls painful arguments. Every time she feels a flash of rage, but quickly it dissolves into shame. Maybe she did imagine it. Maybe she is exaggerating. It's the same trap as childhood. Her truth collides with her need for closeness, and closeness always wins. Or take Daniel. As a boy, whenever he questioned his mother, she would withdraw her affection. Silent treatment for hours, sometimes days. As an adult, when his girlfriend snaps, "You're impossible to deal with," he immediately apologizes. Not because he believes it's true, but because the silent withdrawal terrifies him. The loneliness of childhood is reawakened. He'll do anything to avoid it. This is why gaslighting is not random. It doesn't land the same way with everyone. For those of us with shaky attachment histories, it digs straight into old wounds. We're not just arguing about being late to dinner. We're reliving the terror of being abandoned, shamed, or unseen as kids. Carl Rogers, the humanistic psychologist, spoke about unconditional positive regard, the experience of being accepted without judgment. When a child doesn't get that, they learn to edit themselves. They perform to be loved. Later in life, that editing becomes second nature. So when a partner distorts reality, instead of resisting, we adapt. We bend. Because our nervous system has long practiced trading authenticity for attachment. But here's another layer: cultural training. Many of us grew up in environments where politeness, keeping the peace, or respecting authority was prized above honesty. Kim John Payne, who writes about family simplicity, notes that children in such systems often grow into adults who struggle to trust their own pace, their own needs. In love, that conditioning means we often tolerate distortion because we've been taught that pushing back is rude, ungrateful, or even dangerous. Think about how it plays out in small, ordinary ways. You're scrolling through your phone. You see a message from a friend, a warm invitation. You start to smile. Your partner glances over and says sharply, "Who are you texting?" "Why are you hiding your phone?" You feel the familiar sting of being accused, but instead of saying, "That's unfair," you freeze. Childhood training whispers, "Don't escalate, smooth it over." You show them the screen, you laugh it off. But inside, something contracts. You're cooking dinner. They criticize how you cut the vegetables, call it sloppy. You want to protest. It's not sloppy, it's just fine. But before you even speak, you swallow it, because long ago, you learned that contradicting someone you rely on never ends well. You're lying in bed, finally ready to rest. They sigh, mutter that you're selfish for falling asleep before them. A wave of guilt washes over you. You roll back, stay awake, try to keep them company. Even your basic bodily rhythms feel negotiable now. What do all these moments have in common? The small betrayals of your inner compass. And each time you bend, you reinforce the cycle. My truth is less important than keeping this bond intact. It's important to see that gaslighting is not only about the partner's tactics. It's about the pre-existing fracture lines inside us. That's what makes it stick. That's what makes you second-guess yourself instead of walking away. And here's the cruel genius of it. Every time you bend, you feel a little less like yourself, which makes you cling harder to the relationship. Because if you're losing yourself, at least you don't want to lose them too. Jung described this as the pull of the complex, an emotional knot formed early in life that gets triggered again and again. Gaslighting is like a match striking that old knot. It lights instantly. You're not just in a fight with your partner, you're in a fight with the ghosts of your childhood. So what do we do with this knowledge? The first step is to see that your confusion isn't proof that you're broken. It's proof that an old survival strategy is still running. That younger self inside you, the one who needed attachment at any cost, is still driving. That's why we'll move, in the next part, into awareness as leverage. Because once you can say, this isn't me being crazy, this is me reliving an old pattern, everything changes. The fog begins to lift. But before we leave part 2, let's sit with this truth. If you doubt yourself so often in love, it may not be because your memory is weak or your feelings are wrong. It may be because long ago, someone else taught you to distrust your inner world. And healing doesn't mean erasing that history. It means slowly learning to choose authenticity and connection without sacrificing one for the other. If this journey eases something inside you, stay with us. Subscribe, and each step will bring a little more clarity. Thank you. There's a moment that comes, sometimes after months, sometimes after years, when something inside you whispers, wait, this isn't right. At first, it's barely audible, a flicker of doubt inside the doubt. But it matters, because once you start noticing the pattern, the gaslight no longer burns as brightly. The fog doesn't fully clear yet, but a shaft of light cuts through. Take Anna. She's been with her boyfriend for 2 years. Every time she asks for reassurance, he accuses her of being needy. Every time she points out a broken promise, he insists she misheard. Normally, Anna collapses into apology. But one night, as he's telling her, "I never said I'd call you back," she hears her own voice respond quietly. "Yes, you did." I remember clearly. He keeps denying, but this time, something is different. Instead of spiraling into shame, she notices the pattern itself. It's not about whether she's right or wrong. It's about how every conflict ends with her apologizing. That recognition lands in her chest with a kind of trembling clarity. This is the beginning of awareness. Carl Rogers called it congruence. When your outer expression begins to align with your inner experience. For so long, Anna's inner voice has been silenced. But that night, a fragment of congruence breaks through. And once you glimpse it, you can't unsee it. Let's pause here, because this moment matters more than it seems. Gaslighting thrives in confusion. It keeps you locked in endless circles of he said/she said, until you give up on your own memory. The turning point is when you stop debating facts and start recognizing the structure of the interaction. It's like looking at a chessboard. At first, you're focused on individual pieces. This pawn here, that knight there. But suddenly, you zoom out, you see the pattern of moves, and you realize you've been playing a game where your opponent always bends the rules. That shift from content to process is powerful. It's what Jung described when he said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The unconscious pattern here is self-doubt. Once you see it, it stops feeling like fate and starts feeling like choice. Now, awareness alone doesn't solve it. You don't suddenly stand up, slam the door, and walk away. What changes is more subtle. The way you hold yourself in the moment. Imagine this. You're in the middle of an argument. Your partner says, "You're so forgetful, you never remember correctly." Normally, your stomach would clench and you'd start desperately justifying your memory. But now, you pause, you take a breath, and you think, there it is again. The script, That pause, that single beat of recognition, is the wedge. Instead of collapsing inward, you lean ever so slightly outward. You see the gaslight, even as it burns. Kim John Payne writes about simplicity as a form of protection for children. In adulthood, simplicity can work as protection for us too. A simple mental phrase becomes your anchor. This is not about my memory. This is about control. Notice what happens in your body when you hold that thought. The confusion doesn't fully disappear, but the ground beneath you feels a little more solid. Let me give you a few lived examples of this turning point. Elena used to journal only about her mistakes. "I must have overreacted," she'd write after every fight. But one day, she flips open her notebook and reads back through the pages. The pattern stares back at her, entry after entry of apologies for things she didn't do. That day, instead of writing another apology, she writes, "I see the cycle." That's her wedge. Mark sits with a therapist. He tells her, "She keeps saying I'm impossible to love." His therapist asks, "Who first made you feel impossible to love?" Mark's chest tightens. The image of his mother surfaces, her sharp voice, her withdrawal. For the first time, he sees that this isn't just about his girlfriend. It's about old pain replaying. The words hit differently now. They're no longer absolute truth. They're echoes. Lena is on the couch. Her boyfriend says, "You're imagining things again." Normally, she would cry, but this time she quietly whispers to herself, "I trust what I felt." She doesn't say it out loud. Not yet. But inside, she holds it like a small flame cupped in her hands. These aren't dramatic Hollywood breakthroughs. They're tiny inner pivots, but they matter because they rewire the nervous system slowly. Gábor Maté explains that awareness is the first antidote to trauma-driven patterns. When you can observe yourself with compassion, you're no longer blindly repeating. You're watching, you're learning. And this is where self-talk becomes crucial. Instead of echoing your partner's voice, "I'm too sensitive, I'm exaggerating," you start to practice a counter voice. Rogers would call this offering yourself unconditional positive regard. It sounds like, "I'm allowed to remember things differently. My feelings matter, even if they don't agree. It's not my job to erase myself to keep someone comfortable." The first time you say these things, they feel clumsy, even fake, but slowly they plant seeds. They become what I call reality anchors. You don't need to convince your partner anymore, you anchor yourself. Let's be real, in the beginning, this doesn't look like strength. It looks like shaking hands as you try to hold your ground. It looks like crying alone after the fight, but then writing down your version in a notebook instead of discarding it. It looks like saying one small no where you used to say yes. But this is how leverage begins. Jung talked about individuation, the process of becoming your own person, distinct from the roles others cast on you. Gaslighting interrupts individuation by pulling you back into the role of the confused one, the overreactor. The turning point is reclaiming the role of witness. You watch the play unfold, and you realize you don't have to play the part written for you. And yes, setbacks will come. You'll catch yourself apologizing when you didn't need to. You'll feel the old shame rising up. But each time, you'll also notice, I see it now. And once you see, you can't unsee. Let me put it this way. Gaslighting works like a magician's trick. The magician distracts you with one hand while the other does the real move. For years, you've been hypnotized by the distraction, but now you've started watching the other hand. And once you know the trick, the spell loses its power. That's the essence of the turning point. The fog begins to thin. You're not free yet, but you've stopped being fully trapped. And that small shift makes all the difference. Because from here, the question changes. It's no longer, am I crazy? It becomes, what do I do with this awareness? And that is exactly where we'll go next, into practices that help you hold on to clarity in the middle of the storm. By now, you've begun to notice that the most damaging part of gaslighting in love is not the partner's words in the moment. It's the erosion of your own ground beneath them. Awareness is the first crack of light, but for that light to grow, it needs practices that take awareness from the mind into daily living. Let's talk about what those practices actually look like, not as abstract rules, but as psychological tools that you can carry into conversations, arguments, and even quiet moments when self-doubt takes over. The first practice is the use of boundary phrases. Gaslighting thrives on pulling you into endless debates about what really happened. If you keep defending, the ground shifts beneath you until you collapse into apology. A boundary phrase cuts that loop. It is short, calm, and non-negotiable. Something as simple as, "I remember it differently," or "We may not see this the same way." Notice the structure. It doesn't attack, it doesn't defend, it doesn't escalate. What it does is mark out your psychological territory. You have the right to hold on to your memory and your perception, even if the other person refuses to accept it. Why does this work? Because it interrupts the unconscious script. Instead of trying to convince them, you are reminding yourself that your perception has value. Carl Rogers described the healing power of congruence, your inner reality and your outer expression aligning. A boundary phrase is a miniature act of congruence. It may not change their behavior, but it stops you from betraying yourself. The second practice is what I call reality anchors. Gaslighting makes you question not just what happened, but whether you can trust your memory at all. In that fog, it is crucial to have external anchors that remind you of what is true. This can be as simple as keeping a private journal or writing brief notes on your phone after difficult conversations. The point is not to create evidence for an argument. It is to create evidence for yourself. When you reread those entries, you see the consistency of your own experience. You begin to realize that the confusion was not proof of your instability, but a product of repeated distortion. Think about what happens in your body when you read your own words from a week ago that describe exactly what you are feeling today. There is a quiet relief. You're not losing your mind. You're observing a pattern. Verena Kast wrote about the healing power of recognizing emotional cycles. Reality anchors help you see those cycles more clearly, which restores the sense that your inner world is reliable. The third practice involves nervous system regulation. Gaslighting is not only a cognitive experience, it's physical. Your heart races, your chest tightens, your thoughts scatter. In that state, you are far more likely to collapse into apology or silence. Gábor Maté has often emphasized how unresolved stress hardwires the body to overreact, to present triggers. Learning to downshift the nervous system gives you the space to think before you spiral. That might mean taking a slow breath before you respond, planting your feet firmly on the ground, or giving yourself permission to say, "I need a pause. We'll continue this later." These are not escapes. They are acts of regulation that protect you from being swept away in the storm. When you combine boundary phrases, reality anchors, and regulation, you create a triangle of stability. Each supports the others. The phrase guards your outer voice. The anchor guards your memory. The regulation guards your body. Together, they guard your sense of self. Of course, it will not be perfect. You will have moments where you hear yourself apologizing for something you did not do, and afterward, you will feel the familiar weight of shame. That does not mean you failed. It means you are practicing. As with any form of recovery, there are repetitions, setbacks, and gradual strengthening. The key is not whether you held your ground every time, but whether you return to these practices after you wobble. Here is something important. These practices are not about changing your partner. They're about changing the way you inhabit yourself. Erich Fromm reminded us that love is an active concern for the life and growth of another. If what you are experiencing is control rather than growth, you may not be able to transform them, but you can transform the way you show up in the relationship. And sometimes, that shift alone reveals more clearly whether there is any true love left, or whether you're being held in place only by manipulation. What might this look like in daily life? Imagine a morning where you are accused of forgetting something. Instead of defending for 10 minutes, you say calmly, "I remember it differently." That evening, you jot it down in your journal, reinforcing your anchor. Before bed, you take 3 steadying breaths to release the tension. The entire exchange still stings, but you are not drowning in it. That is progress. Or imagine a late-night conversation where blame is shifted onto you. Normally, you would panic and argue back. This time you pause, remind yourself, this is the cycle. I am not broken. You postpone the discussion. You go for a short walk, letting your nervous system cool. The problem is not solved, but your self-trust is intact. That is a quiet victory. These may seem like small shifts, but they accumulate. Each time you protect your voice, your memory, and your body, you are reteaching yourself something profound. I exist. My perception has value. My feelings are not negotiable. And with repetition, this becomes less about survival in the relationship and more about strengthening the self that will carry you beyond it. Jung spoke of individuation as the lifelong process of becoming who you are, separate from the projections of others. Gaslighting tries to prevent individuation. It forces you into the role of the confused one, the overly sensitive one. These practices are ways of stepping out of that assigned role. You are no longer merely the character in their script. You are the author of your own. What you will notice over time is that the panic lessens. The shame loosens. The fog does not clear all at once, but it thins enough for you to walk with more certainty. And in that clarity, you begin to see the deeper question, not just, how do I survive this relationship, but do I want to continue living in a reality where love is defined by self-erasure? That question leads us naturally into our final part, the integration of all of this. Because the end goal is not simply to manage gaslighting better. The end goal is to reclaim a life where love does not mean doubt, where connection does not cost you yourself. If you followed me through this episode, you've probably felt a mixture of relief and heaviness. Relief, because at last, someone is putting words to what you've been living with. Heaviness, because naming it doesn't make it vanish. You still have to face the daily reality of it. So let's be honest here. Gaslighting in love is not just bad communication. It is a pattern that pulls you away from yourself until you barely recognize who you are. And the cost is enormous. When love makes you feel smaller, less real, less stable, that is not love. That is control. But here's the shift I want to leave you with. You are not powerless inside this cycle. You've seen in this series how awareness can pierce the fog. You've seen how boundary phrases, reality anchors, and nervous system downshifts help you hold on to what is true. You've seen that the real work is not about convincing the other person, but about reclaiming your own ground. The deeper invitation is this: to stop measuring love by how much of yourself you can erase to keep it. Carl Jung called individuation the process of becoming whole, even when it means disappointing others' expectations. Erich Fromm wrote that love, at its core, is not possession, but a commitment to nurture life in both people. And Rogers reminded us that healing begins the moment you can offer yourself the unconditional regard you have longed to receive from others. That means that even inside the fog, you can begin to say, I exist. My perception is valid. My feelings deserve respect. It may sound small, but every time you affirm this, you weaken the hold of the gaslight. You will notice changes, subtle at first. You start catching yourself before you apologize unnecessarily. You stop rewriting your memory after every disagreement. You breathe more deeply in the middle of conflict instead of collapsing into panic. And you realize that you can stay present without giving your whole self away. And then comes the hardest truth of all. Once you taste this clarity, you may discover that the relationship itself cannot survive it. Because gaslighting requires your silence, your doubt, your collapse. When those stop, the cycle has nowhere to go. Some partners may adjust, soften, even grow if confronted with your steadiness. Others will escalate or leave because the dynamic no longer feeds them. Either way, you will begin to see more clearly what is real. And that clarity is a gift, even when it hurts. The point of this work is not just to survive a relationship shaped by gaslighting. The point is to recover your right to live as a whole person, to be in love without losing yourself, to feel safe in your own perception, to walk into each day knowing that your memories, your emotions, and your body's signals are not weaknesses, but guides. So if you've been doubting yourself for too long, let this be the sentence you carry with you. Love should not make you lose yourself. If it does, it isn't love, it's control. You deserve a love that nurtures your authenticity, not one that erases it. You deserve to be seen without distortion, to be held without manipulation. And whether that happens inside this relationship or beyond it, the practices you have begun are already proof that you are stronger than the fog. Remember, individuation is not an event, but a process. Every pause, every boundary phrase, every note you keep, every breath you take to steady yourself, that is individuation in action. That is you becoming more fully yourself. As we close this episode, I want to honor the courage it takes to even listen to this. Because if you're here, it means you're already searching for a life beyond distortion. And that searching is the beginning of freedom. In our next video, we'll go even deeper into how to rebuild trust in yourself after leaving a gaslighting dynamic. How to restore intimacy without fear. How to open again without losing your center. For now, hold on to this. You are real, your perception matters, and love is possible without losing yourself.